in 1968, my then wife, Gwen, became the first dean of women and assistant dean of student affairs at the then Florida Technological University. And we moved down here. I was working full-time for the National Guard in Washington, D.C. And I had spent about 2 years almost on continuous active duty involved with civil disturbances across the country. So I was pretty well burned out. So we decided that we would come down here. When I came here, the job I took was to be the executive director of what was known then as the Downtown Orlando. Today, the same organization is known as Downtown Partnership. But there was a group who wanted to move ahead on bringing Orlando up into the current centuries. And Bill Turnbull, who was an attorney at that time here, very active in the Democratic Party project, had come across an action in California where they created what was known as the Downtown Development District. And with that, we had a gathering of forces from the downtown organization and businessmen, and resulted in the creation of what was then known as the Orlando Central City Neighborhood District. And along with that came a millage, that applied, one mill, that was supplied only to the new construction value, not clear across the board. And that worked well. I then became the first director of the Downtown Development Board, which is kind of a semi-city agency because it has its own funding source and is also has a separate board of directors. It works hand in hand, though, with City Hall. Because of my previous involvements with library, Mayor Langford appointed me to the Orlando City Library Board. And so I was involved on the board then, and part of that time then we decided that what was good for downtown was good for a library. So we had a campaign that resulted successfully in the creation of the Orange County Public Library System and District. At the time that it was obvious that the old Albertson Library was not going to be large enough, then Glenn Miller, who was in the director and so on, conceived the idea that we could have done several things. We could have kept the main library there and put more branches out and so on, but felt that we needed to have a main or a central library system that at the main would be our largest depository of books and other library materials. So at that time, the Albertson Library sat at the northeast corner of the block that is bounded by Washington and Rosslyn and Wall and Magnolia. Next door to it was the old JC building, and on the back side there was a couple of converted buildings and so on. So the idea was, well, we would buy all that and create the site where we could build the new library addition, and did it in a way that we could encompass the old library, not maintaining its facade, but being able to move seamlessly into the library. And so that is really what happened to create the library square. I mean, we got the land and built the building. We had a lot of discussion about the exterior design of the building, which is unique, what it looks like and what it was, that when they put up the framing for the library and poured the cement walls in and took the plane off, they never smoothed the sides, see, so you had all the impact of the boards and that formed all that. It was a national prize winner, you know, for that. Well, my other big love besides libraries has been Boy Scouts. I started out as a Cub Scout when I was 8 years old in 1939, and have been involved ever since, except for some periods where Uncle Sam had a different type of activity for me to do. I have over 55 years in as an adult scouter. And that led to the fact that my major in college was history and English and math and so on. So I've always been interested in history. And one thing that got all this going was that the Scouts have a historical trails program. There's historical trails all over the United States. So I decided we ought to have one in Orlando. So I went out and I created what was known as the Orlando Historical Trail. And there's a patch that the Scouts can use and still do it. And so that was the first trail that we had in downtown. Now, I don't maintain that anymore, but I can't keep up with all the changes that are done, you know. But it spawned other things. Steve Ragehair has had his historical ghost tours and so on. And I think that's always interesting because people like to have roots. People like to have a sense of neighborhood and identity to where they live. And we may not know the names of our neighbors, but we like to know where it is that we live. And I think tours and so on are a very important part of that. When I was director of Downtown Development Board, we looked at a number of ways that we could bring people back downtown because they were going out and we wanted to bring them back in. So we conceived the idea of having an arts and crafts show in the fall just before Thanksgiving and the Christmas buying season. Now, we did not envision trying to create another Winter Park Art Festival, but we wanted to have a festival that encouraged the amateurs, the people who did things as a hobby, as school kids and so on, to come out and have a chance to sell their wares so that people could come down and look and they might pre-buy a Christmas present or any of that. We had absolutely no idea what was going to happen. But we got together a little group. that was headed first by John Beck, who was then the general manager of Downtown Ivies, and got working with some people at the city who were involved in the arts and programs, and we built up a list, and so we sent out invitations and people. We had a huge response, and when we actually had the event in November, we had a ton of people come out, and it was an instant success. So in about 5 years, we raised over $100,000 to make that deal, and that led to the first drawdown and the cleaning of the lake and putting a lot of stuff in. And that still goes on that way. As we went through the years, the city wanted to have an Arts in April program, and so we extended the Fiesta into that. And then when the city's bicentennial came along in 1985, the city decided that they wanted to have a big fireworks display at Lake Eola. So the Fiesta and the Park Committee, which was composed of representatives from different city agencies and representatives of the artists, took that on. After about 15, 20 years, we had to give that up because the cost of the fireworks had accelerated to be more than we could do. So the city took it over and has operated since then, pretty much on the way that we did the original 4th of July things. The biggest change in Orlando has been every 5 minutes you can almost blink your eye and the skyline of downtown Orlando has changed. When I came here, you still had major department stores downtown, and the fleeing out to, by the stores out to the new malls was just on the cusp of happening. And it was, had not really hit a big major boom that didn't take place until after Disney came. Of course, during the opening of a space age, Lockheed Martin expansion had a lot to do with it. But the biggest change, I think, has been from Orlando and Orange County being more or less a nice place to live and a nice place to be, to a hustling and bustling metropolitan area. We can already see the transition taking place as more and more people are reading from screens instead of from printed text. I think that our library has been in the forefront of those nationally in keeping up with the changing technologies of whether it's an iPad or a tablet or a DVD or so on. We operate as a library should. A lot of people think that of a library as it being in a place where there's a bunch of old books stacked and they go in and take it out. But historically, and the Library of at Alexandria is a good example. It was a place where was not only stored the written knowledge, but architecture, art, all sorts of stuff that related to the past and president of the library systems. And I think that's what a library is, that it is a center of culture, not of books.